Every year in India, hundreds of children are stolen from their mostly poor families and then sold to agencies who offer them for adoption abroad. 15 years ago, one of them was a girl named Zabeen. She was kidnapped from her Indian family and then adopted by an Australian couple. She's lived here since she was 3. Now, the biological family wants her back, and they're asking the Australian government to order her return to India. Zabeen may be one of hundreds of children who's come to Australia this way, and in this case, her adoptive family isn't giving up without a fight. South Asia correspondent Michael Edwards has this report.
Fatima and her son Hussein have spent the past 15 years reliving a terrible day. Back in 1998, from right under their noses, they lost their 2-year-old daughter and sister, Zabeen. The 2 children had been playing near their home in Chennai when, seemingly from out of nowhere, a man abducted them both.
We were on a break from school. Our mother was shopping. We were playing in an auto rickshaw. Then this man came and he started the auto. We asked him who he was. We asked him to let us out. He didn't answer. The man drove off with us. I managed to escape when the auto slowed, and I asked him to let my sister go. I then started screaming that he stole my sister.
For Zabeen's mother, Fatima, the pain at times has been almost unbearable. For a long time she just assumed her daughter was dead, but it turns out she wasn't.
I received a phone call from the police saying they'd found our daughter. The police had arrested the kidnapper and they showed him to me. I was so angry with him. I said, "Do you not have children? How could you do this to us?" Then they showed us all these photographs and I was asked to identify my daughter.
The family was told Zabeen had been snatched by criminals, making $5,000 at a time, selling children to disreputable adoption agencies. After a police investigation, she was eventually traced to Australia.
The police got me to point out my daughter's photo. The policeman then told me she was in Australia. I said, "I want my child back." The policeman said it is not possible because she's in Australia. He told me not to worry, that she's in a good place. Australia is a good place. But I told them that even if it is good, I want my child back.
Fatima and her family have been fighting to get the child back for 8 years. The ABC first met them in 2009 when they went public about their case. The Indian adoption agency that bought Zabeen from her kidnappers was raided by police in 2005, and its president was charged over the scandal. It's been a gruelling saga for Zabeen's Australian family, who legally adopted 2 girls from India. They've never spoken publicly before. Today they agreed to speak to 7:30 on condition of anonymity because of Australia's adoption laws.
And so at what point did you discover that these children were stolen?
Well, it hasn't been proven completely that they've been stolen now, not beyond any doubt. But the accusations first surfaced about 4 or 5 years after we brought them back. They became Australians a year after we brought them back in 2001. And then the accusations began to surface about 2005. Naturally, we wanted evidence, and there was nothing more really except unsubstantiated claims. But the claims have kept coming ever since.
What kind of emotions were you going through when these allegations first raised that, you know, one of your daughters was perhaps stolen and kidnapped as a baby?
Well, we didn't want to take somebody's child away. We wanted to make a home for a couple of children that didn't have a home, that were in orphanages, which our 2 girls were, and make a good home for them and make a good life for them here in Australia. So we were absolutely shocked.
And so what did you do?
Well, initially we wanted clear-cut evidence, and none was really forthcoming. When the police inspector phoned, I said to him, "Are you telling me as a professional policeman that you have strong evidence?" that our girls are stolen, and you went very quiet, you wouldn't answer that. So we've never had convincing evidence.
But despite the legality of Zabin's adoption in Australia, Fatima says a crime took place when she was abducted, and the Australian government should acknowledge this and allow her to have her child back. Yesterday in New Delhi, Fatima met officials at the Australian High Commission and demanded access to Zabin within 90 days, or she warned them she'll file a criminal complaint.
So who would the criminal complaint be against?
Against these Australian authorities who accepted that child and the father or family who is having that kidnapped child.
Fatima says Australian officials told her that they'd pass on her concerns to the relevant authorities in Australia, but they gave no assurances that she could get access to her daughter. Social welfare activists are concerned that there could be dozens of other cases like Zabin's in Australia.
We got a lawyer to write to this family's lawyer and to say that provided that a DNA test was positive and showed that their kidnapped child was in fact our eldest daughter, then perhaps we could agree that she should stay here till she's 18. And in the meantime, we would send them reports of how she was going, we would send them photos, and at a suitable time we'd put them in contact. Now, that letter was sent off, but we've never received a reply. So our view is the ball is in their court. We made the effort to do that, and at least to sort of mitigate their undoubted suffering, and we've heard nothing in reply.
Fatima's daughter is one of hundreds of children who have been kidnapped and illegally adopted out to Western parents by criminal gangs. Since finding out her Zabin was alive, Fatima's ordeal has been a rallying point for other families who have lost their children.
Fatima or her family never give these children to any adoption agency or something like that. It's a direct kidnapping. So it's a crime happened on Indian soil, and through that crime, the child went in international adoption in there. So it's a crime. So even might be in Australian laws, it should be there that under crime, if anything is happening, is illegal. Even though this adoption happened in a legal way, this is illegal.
Arun Dola works for a European NGO that has dealt with the cases of hundreds of abducted children.
I don't think they have an idea what really happens, but it's on the other hand they close their eyes, because everybody who pays so much money for a child or pays so much money in a country like India or even an African country does know that, for example, $5,000 go a long way in countries like India. I mean, people do a lot for this money.
Arun Dola knows of at least one other case where Australian parents have adopted an Indian child who had been abducted. He's almost certain there are many more.
The police only investigated those cases where the parents had formally filed a complaint of a missing child. I know of many more cases which are indicated in early police reports from the interrogation of the traffickers, that there are many more kidnapped and lifted children. But nobody is investigating. It should be investigated.
The last contact Fatima and Hussein had with Zabin, who has lived almost all of her life in Australia, was via a conversation on Skype. They say she's largely forgotten how to speak Tamil, and they describe her as thoroughly Australian in her clothing and her manners.
She's a complete Australian, and we don't think she ought to be forced to go back into a situation where she doesn't speak the language, she doesn't understand the culture, and she doesn't know any of the people.
What happens if the legal system dictates that you have to send your elder daughter back to India?
Okay. First of all, we will fight that tooth and claw. We've taken legal advice, and we've been told that the chances of an Australian court ruling that an Australian citizen who's grown up here and has no memories of another country should be forced to go back there, the chances are almost non-existent. It almost certainly won't happen.
But whatever the legal arguments are, Fatima is resolved to fight on. Her reasoning is simple. She just wants her little girl back.
I request of them that they bring my daughter back. Let her see that her parents are alive, that her father and sisters are there. Let her see our family, because we are her parents. They might have treated my child well, but they should bring her back to meet us.
Put yourselves in the birth mother's position. You must have done that. What do you feel?
horror, dismay, pity, excruciating sadness, all that and more. It must be absolutely terrible. The horror of this is quite dreadful. But despite all of that, the first commitment has to be to the well-being of the child. And the well-being of the child, given that she's an English-speaking Australian with no memories of India, is that she stays here till she's 18 and she can make decisions for herself.